So the Ancient Gods DLC for Doom Eternal has been out for almost a month at this point, give or take. And general consensus is that the DLC is much harder than the base game of Doom Eternal, as it should be. It's the continuation of the story. The majority of players that are going from this game to the DLC have at least a solid foundation on the combat, the movement, and general knowledge. And then you have the higher level of players that have dedicated the last 7 months of their lives to just mastering the hell out of this. Taking that in consideration, along with the fact that it's probably going to be a good chunk of time until we see the next DLC itself, we really had to go above and beyond to make sure that this thing was not easy. And so their solution was to make the first level pretty much a master level, and with the 2 subsequent levels, them introducing 2 brand new demon types, throwing at us a double marauder fight, a buffed marauder fight, and a boss fight that has to be one of the most annoying fights I've ever dealt with on console. The stakes have definitely been raised, but today I wanted to tackle the concept of the DLC being easier than the base game of Doom Eternal, which objectively speaking I would say it actually is. The only hard part of the DLC itself I would say is just the Seraphim fight. But in today's video we're going to go over why I think that is, a little bit of my experience in Ultra Nightmare from the base game to the DLC, and just have a small little conversational piece. Now if you guys have completed Ultra Nightmare in both the DLC and the base game, or if you've just played both, let me know which one did you struggle with more, which one felt harder to you, and if you can name a specific part, I think that'd be interesting as well. Like, I know a lot of people struggled on Cultist base, and a specific part of that level would be the pit. Mine was more right where you got the rocket launcher. So while everyone was complaining about the pit, I couldn't even beat that damn part. With that being said, let's start off talking about the DLC. The DLC obviously dropped 7 months after the release of Doom Eternal. That's a ton of time to master the game. Spent a lot of time learning the combat loop, learning how to move, perfecting Nightmare, Ultra Nightmare runs. So obviously with that chunk of time, players had some high expectations, and I would say for the most part the DLC did definitely deliver in raising that challenging aspect. But I do think after 2 or 3 blind runs, once you get a feel for what you're facing in every specific segment of a level, especially once you get down how to deal with blood angels or blood makers and a strategy for taking out possessed demons, whether if we're talking about the Baron or a Cyber Mancubus or an Arachnotron, once you get strategies down and you have an idea of what you're facing, the challenging aspect highly diminishes, which I think is awesome when it comes to Doom Eternal specifically. I don't think there's ever really a part of the game that's damn near impossible. It just boils down to technical knowledge, and I would say in a lot of instances reflexes, especially on PC when you're playing on those higher FPSs. If you're just a tad bit too slow, man, that could be the end of your entire run. But ironically, I would say with the DLC specifically, the thing that can superficially make this DLC feel harder is the same thing that can make it feel so much easier for experienced or very skilled players, and that is the constant respawning of fodder demon. If you don't know how to move, or if you're not paying attention, it's very easy to corner yourself or end up dying to constantly backing up into fodder demon that are somehow sneaking up on you. But if you're on the other side of that coin, or if you're someone that's constantly airborne via meat hooking launch pads or portals, then they don't really become that much of a problem. And weirdly enough, going back and looking at a lot of my Ultra Nightmare gameplay, I've noticed that there was a lot of times, specifically in the UAC facility, where my run should have ended prematurely, but because there's such an abundance of portals and jump pads and monkey bars that you have so many avenues of not only escaping, but recuperating some of your lost health, recuperating some of your lost armor. If you can manage to just isolate one single fodder demon, in some instances that's the difference between life and death. And because they're so abundant in the DLC, a really good player, or even a halfway decent player, can actually enter a fight on the verge of death, come out of a very intense encounter, and somehow come out of that encounter maxed out on health, maxed out on armor, and damn near maxed out on ammo. And that arena fight could have none of those things. All that stuff could just be an accumulation of you knowing how to take advantage of the game's core mechanics. And I think a good example of at least trying to catch myself from the verge of death would be in the UAC facility. Right after the cutscene where it becomes a destroyed UAC facility, you're pretty much thrown into this arena fight where you gotta deal with everything. A handful of Arachnotrons, Whiplashes, Hell Knights, Pain Elemental, Cacodemons, and it tops off with a Tyrant and a Baron of Hell. This fight is weird for me. I either do amazingly well, or I do well for the first half, and then once the Pain Elemental and then the Baron spawn, everything just goes to hell. And this gameplay is one of those instances where that ends up happening. Now, This arena layout is basically a giant circle. 3 levels to it. There's some monkey bars, there are 2 portals you can take advantage of. There's a blood punch pickup at the very bottom, and there's only 1 major health pickup and then a handful of smaller ones. And then there's also a haste pickup that's incredibly helpful when it comes to the tyrant. But with this gameplay, it's just riddled with so many mistakes. But I'm happy to show it because this goes to show how forgiving Doom Eternal can be even on Ultra Nightmare, which this is, or I should say was, my first run on Ultra Nightmare. Now, it started with me fighting the Baron in a way that I shouldn't have. I dropped down, tried to recuperate health from the zombie, which didn't happen. I somehow managed to make my way back to the Arachnotron, glory killed him for some health, moved over to the Carcass, hit him with the blood punch, finished him off with the glory kill, picked up the haste, and I basically cleared out the arena. But it's funny because I never really got out of that bad spot. It continued for the next 30 seconds to be on the verge of death, and maybe another minute or so until I completely cleared out the arena, but I don't want to go too deep into breaking this down. I'm basically just saying that there's so many avenues of escape, and the fact that we've had so much time to nail the combat loop, nail the movement, experiment with all kinds of different weapon combinations on top of id Software giving us a maxed out Praetor suit, all the runes and everything at our disposal. Really and truly, all your deaths are ultimately going to come to your own personal errors. Of course, coming from an experienced player's perspective, I mean, you're not really going to die like you would at the beginning of the base game when there's so many more limitations to your entire weapon arsenal and your movement. I don't think there was a single time in the entire DLC where I died because my dash cooldown was just a second or even half a second too long. Meanwhile, in my first couple of attempts on the harder difficulties of the base game, not even necessarily Ultra Nightmare, there was a handful of times where I died for that very reason. And I will say that there's an extra learning curve that even for experienced players, you kind of have to adjust for those first couple levels in the base game with those limitations on your arsenal, those limitations on your movement. id Software very sneakily boosts up the difficulty setting in Cultist and in Doom Hunter base simply for the fact that they're incorporating those heavier demon types like the Mancubus and even the Pinkies. Even though the Pinky's not that challenging per se, it still is a demon that you may struggle with if you're not utilizing jump pads properly, or if your cooldown on your ice bomb, your meat hook, or even your dash isn't quite high enough. The game gets harder while you're still vulnerable. You still have some limitations that you feel while playing. Meanwhile, in the DLC, there's never really a moment like that. Regardless of how annoying possessed barons are, you still have the ability to move around without really being stopped. And kind of bringing this back to full circle, that's an element that makes that Seraphim fight feel a little bit harder. You know, even though physically or technically your movement isn't really hindered like it is at the beginning of the base game, your avenues of escape and how much freedom you have in the arena is restrained. I mean, you only have 1 or 2 fodder demon coupled with some eyeballs that are hurting you, along with blood angels that have the ability to actually stopping you or slowing you down horribly. And in some ways that fight is a little reminiscent of the beginning of the base game because you have all these damn restraints put on you again. But either way, experienced player or not, you have a 20-hour campaign that requires you to build your arsenal from the ground up, max out your Praetor suit, find all your runes, max out your weapons, and then make it all the way to the final sin. I'm speaking in terms of Ultra Nightmare now, and not die. Which, by the way, dying to the Icon of Sin can't be compared to dying to the Seraphim in Ultra Nightmare. I mean, again, you're comparing a 3-hour expansion to a 20-hour campaign, where the first 4 levels of the campaign are objectively the hardest of the entire game. If you're really good, dying to the Seraphim is a matter of, oh shit, okay, give me a day or half a day and I'll be right back to this fight. Dying to the Icon of Sin is like, oh shit, give me a week. And that's if I can make it past the Doom Hunter base. Which I know the majority of people struggle on Cultist, but I say Doom Hunter base is equally as hard. Or at least it was for me. But of course, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. You guys think the DLC or the base game was harder? Which one did you have a much tougher time on? Just running through or even on Ultra Nightmare? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about all this. Keep in mind, I'm probably going to be late answering the comments, as when this is up, I'm probably going to be out cold. But like always, guys, my name is Cynic. Thank you all so much for watching. If you guys haven't joined the Discord yet, link to that is of course always down below in the pinned comment. Feel free to join. Been expanding lately, not just pertaining to Doom, but other games as well. A lot of people have been hooked on the new zombies that just recently dropped. Some people are preparing for Halo Infinite and Dying Light 2 if that ever actually becomes a thing. But until next time, I'll see y'all later.